All right, let's do it. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be, or good evening, no matter where you may be dialing in from. So just a quick recap, as Marissa mentioned, so this session, the initial part will be recorded. And then once we go into breakout rooms, that will not be recorded. So there will be a distinction there. Super excited to have everyone here today. Just a quick intro. My name is Matt Tague. I lead the talent advisory team here at GEM. And really want to welcome everyone to Talent Visionaries. So Talent Visionaries is our thought leadership series where it's our pleasure to bring some of the top minds in the talent space so you can understand how people are not only surviving but thriving in these interesting times we find ourselves in. So today's session is really special and unique. We have many terms that are floating around to describe the moment we find ourselves in. And we all hear the Great Migration, the Great Resignation. There's so many greats going around. We're a fan of saying the Great Attraction here. So this is really an opportunity for us as talent leaders to capitalize on what's going on and attract talent to our companies done in the right way. But today I really wanted to shift that a little bit. I read a study put out by Workable recently where they talk about the great discontent. And they were really honing in on how people are reevaluating their relationship with work, what that looks like, what they want from it, and what the future holds for them. So today we're going to hear about smart HR teams. They're thinking about these changes before they happen and really getting smart about setting themselves up for success. So today we've got the pleasure of welcoming Shauna Geraghty from SVP of People and Operations at Talkdesk to tell us a little bit about her EVP journey. So first of all, just throw a welcome in the chat. Warm welcome to Shauna. Great to have you here. Super excited to get into this. But before we start, I'd love to just set the stage a bit and say, COVID, at Talkdesk, for those who may not be familiar, you've seen some huge milestones. You've got 2,000 employees globally. You reached $10 billion in valuation, raised a Series D. Like, what haven't you done recently? Pretty exciting times there. But love to just hear a little bit about you and where you're at currently to kick it off. And welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And thanks, Marissa, for putting this together. Thank you to the GEM team. Really excited to be here. And I think this is a great topic. But, as you mentioned, last year at Talkdesk was a year for us of transformational growth. I feel like I say that every year, but truly last year, transformational growth. And I'll talk about what that means. We added just over 1,400 people to the organization and grew in 19 different countries. So from like 9 employees in 9 countries to 19 different countries. And we also doubled the people team from about 50 employees to over 100. It was, a period for us that helped lay that foundation to allow us to continue to scale this fiscal year. And this year is no different. We'll see an accelerated growth trajectory and really kind of focusing on our go-to-market and R&D functions.
Awesome. Actually, that sounds like exciting times there. 19 countries, that is a lot. I'm sure we could make our own session about that expansion on its own there. But I'm curious, with that growth, what do you think, defines the new work environment for employees? Like, what do people want now? How has that impacted your EVP in the midst of that growth?
It's such an important question. We all know that the work environment's changed forever, right? It's intuitive. And so one of the things that we were looking at is there a framework to help conceptualize this change? How can we concretize it? And one of our favorites was Gartner. So Gartner created a framework they called the human deal. And in this, they were really suggesting that companies should take the opportunity now to reinvent their EVPs so that it orients employees, it orients the organization to view employees more as people, not workers. And it also provides the companies to understand what attributes are critical to that person's life experience, not just their work experience, and also help to deliver positive emotional response. And so those are the 3 kind of anchors. But what it looked like in practice was that Gartner's suggesting that employees want to feel autonomous. They want to feel understood, valued, cared for, and invested in the organization. And today they have more options, more than ever, for employment, right? Both traditional and non-traditional. And so what we did at Talkdesk is we oriented around the human deal, that framework, and we thought about how can we kind of reconceptualize our EVP. And our goal was really to make sure that Talkdeskers felt more autonomous, So we give them the flexibility over how they work and where they work and how much they work. We also want them to feel valued. So we provide them with personal growth opportunities. We also want to make sure that they feel cared for. So we provide them with a complete set of well-being offerings and ensure that they use them. So essentially what we're doing is we're orienting kind of our EVP around Gartner's human deal framework.
Awesome. I love that. It's a very people-centric approach. And it sounds, we are people. It sounds obvious, but yet so many companies haven't done that yet. And so love to hear about some of those changes that you've made there. I'm curious, just one add-on question to that. I think we've all seen and heard in the pandemic, in the midst of everything going on, particularly the impact of women in this space, right? And so I think I was reading the other day that the labor participation rate for women in the US over the last 2 years has regressed to where it was in 1987.
Wow.
Like that's a pretty sobering statistic. I found it to be pretty sobering, but what have you seen for women in particular? What do you think resonates there in your experience, EVP wise?
Yeah, it's a great question. For us, it comes down to flexibility, offering flexibility. And that's important regardless of, your caregiver status, if you have dependents at home. People want to be able to allow to work where they want, when they want, and how they want. And we understood early on, so early in 2020, early in the pandemic, that the changes in the workplace were going to be long lasting. And I'm really grateful that our CEO is a visionary in that. And so we decided when we closed our 7 global offices to allow our employees to work remotely indefinitely if they choose to. And that was critical to our success because people like myself enjoyed the freedom and flexibility to move from 400 square foot studio apartment in downtown San Francisco to a cabin in the woods in New Hampshire so that I can be closer to my family and create opportunities to bond with my nieces and nephews, when they're young. And that to me was really important. So it's about creating an opportunity for people to build that work-life integration. And I think sadly, females or individuals that typically take on the caregiver and role of taking care of dependents. And if they're working for an employer that doesn't provide that flexibility, they often have to make a difficult decision. And so I'm just really grateful that we at Talkdesk made that decision early on. And when you look at our C-suite composition, we have more than 50% of our C-suite are female. And so we're trying to, lead by example and make sure that representation at the top is we can build that down below for our employee rank and file as well.
Love that. That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, I think people always say that there's no more expensive words in business than we've always done it this way, right? And so I think this situation has helped companies really rethink what that proposition is. So it's great to hear how you're doing that. I'm curious too, a lot of companies, they do a lot of EVP work, which is great, and often, sits in HR broadly, some of the talent branding EVP work, but there's a real challenge in connecting that to the recruiting part of the HR house, right? And so I'm curious, when you think of like the candidates, you oversee both, right? So how does that connect, right? That the messaging you're sending from the EVP perspective, how do you tie that into recruiting with like, ideal candidate profiles, for example?
Yeah, it's critical. I think, and you hit the nail on the head. That's in my opinion, the most important piece is not only creating your EVP, but also the ICP, the ideal candidate profile, so that when we're looking at attracting talent to bring into our organization, they understand exactly what we're offering them, as a company with our value prop, and they can, self-select in and out if they want to. But also we can train our recruiters, the interviewers, the hiring managers to assess candidates using this ICP. And if you're interested, I can tell you a little bit about how we did it at Talkdesk. And I think it's for us one of the focus areas moving into this fiscal year. It's really been something that we've been working towards for the last 2 years. But I'm happy to walk through it if you're curious.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually like to put it out to the audience. I know in these sessions, people love, tactical things that you can do today. And Shauna, I know you have tons of great ideas there. Audience, are you interested to hear some tactical ideas about how Shauna's doing this? Just throw a +1 in the chat if this is resonating. Awesome. We got a few folks. Okay, excellent. Hannah, awesome. Fantastic.
Hannah's on board.
Hannah's on board. Charmaine's at Ross. Excellent. Allison. Fantastic. So I think that's an overwhelming yes. So please take us through it, Shauna.
Okay, so I'll talk you through kind of how we've refined our ICP and also how we're using it across the employee life cycle. So first step for us was really to identify who our top performers were in this new work environment. It could have changed, right? We knew who our top performers were pre-pandemic. Now that we have a couple of years under our belt working in this remote environment, we wanted to go back and look at who are our employees that are standing out and thriving in this new environment. So we did both a qualitative and a quantitative assessment of our employee population to drive who those top performers are. Then once we had that cohort, we engaged in high performer modeling. So essentially what we're doing is we're looking at the competencies, the personality traits using 5-factor model, cultural drivers, past work and education experience, all of that to align on what that modeling looks like for those top performers. And then what we wanted to do is look at what are some of the competencies and characteristics that separate our top performing cohort from those who might just be average or bottom performers. And that distinction was really important. And once we had that, then we used that to refine our ideal candidate profile. And that's kind of where the fun begins, in my opinion, because as you said, it has to span the employee life cycle. And what that looks like for us is we built in these ICP constructs in our interview scorecard kits. We use Greenhouse for our ATS. We've also built for many of our roles interview questions and rubrics so we can score what good, better, and great looks like in the interview process. We also evaluate people who've worked with our candidates in the past using Searchlight. So Searchlight is a reference check platform. They're also like a talent analytics platform, and they've worked with us to build those competencies into their assessment so that we get kind of real life feedback on how that individual behaves within a similar work environment on those competencies. Then towards the end of the interview process, we derive a quality of hire score. Once we bring them into the organization, we're using all of that data to perform kind of new hire assessments. So manager and self-assessments on those same competencies. You can also look at the results of those competencies and develop onboarding guides, new hire pulse checks, personal development plans, thinking about, if one of the core competencies for success we're ranking a little bit lower on, we can turn that into a development plan because we know that's a predictor of success within this environment, and it could be a focus area for those individuals. And then I think most importantly is just like establishing a regular cadence of assessment post-hire. And you can do this in a lot of different ways, taking a competency-based approach to performance management process. You can look at like leading indicators like time to ramp with an account executive, or productivity metrics like quota attainment. And then taking all of that data to refine the ICP and quality of hire methodology, right? Because we're predicting in the interview process that this individual might be a good fit for the organization with our quality of hire score, but then we want to see in practice, does that play out? And so you want to create this virtuous cycle so that you're training kind of the model to get more and more granular in defining what good looks like early in the interview process.
Awesome. I love that's a very thorough. I think there's a LinkedIn post waiting to be written there with those steps. So excellent. I'm curious too, I think we have a variety of folks on the call today. And Talkdesk seems to be a very kind of forward-thinking organization on this, which is awesome that you're able to experiment and build, but not everyone is at such a company, right? We all work in different environments. What was it hard for you to get buy-in from your leadership on this, revamped EVP, changing what good looks like in terms of the candidate profile? Those are big changes.
Big changes.
Yeah. Hard to get buy-in. What did that look like for you?
Well, so I think most people across the organization, they knew that our work experience had changed forever, right? And what that meant also was the type of individual or persona that might be attracted to our environment could have also changed. And so there is at least buy-in that we wanted to go back and look at that, and that it was an important work to do. We also have built a really standardized process. And so our recruiters in the very beginning of the process take the time to sit down with the hiring manager and align on the ICP, not in like a contractual way, but really to set ourselves up for success throughout the interview process. And so even if there wasn't buy-in from the top, there was an opportunity to influence these changes on a one-to-one level that could influence success throughout the rest of the process. So for us, it was easy, but I do think if you're working in an organization where it might be a little bit more challenging to create like whole all-in buy-in to this, to just start by working one-on-one with the hiring manager with those critical roles, because not only can your company have an ICP, but each department might have their own ICP or flavors or different iterations on what good looks like for them.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. I think rather, if you can do a holistic change, I think that's ideal because that's going to have a greater chance of sticking. But if you can't, doing it on a department basis and working with a particular leader can be a great way to make incremental change there as well. That's awesome. Excellent. I'd love to hear too, so you've made these changes, new EVP, new way of thinking about candidates. We hear a lot of talk about how this opportunity in this moment in time can increase the aperture to diverse talent. So I'm curious if you've seen that as an outcome from the changes you've made. Have you found more access? What does that look like for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Talkdesk pre-pandemic, we had about 30% of our US population working in remote roles. Those were mostly our enterprise sales reps, and we had some folks within the go-to-market team, but there wasn't obviously the percentage that we have today. And so what that did was when we shifted and made the determination that we'd allow our employees to work remotely indefinitely, that essentially opened up unlimited talent pools, right? So now we're in a position where we can hire and find the best talent. It doesn't matter where they live, and it doesn't matter, how they want to work either, right? And so that for us was critical to scaling last year. So it was anchoring on that policy early in the pandemic, and then amplifying that when we're reaching out to prospective candidates in the interview process, and making sure on the back end that we really truly are walking the talk, and supporting our employees to make those major life changes and work where they want.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm curious just to take that, one level deeper. There's talent marketing implications too to the changes, you're making, right? So you've made these changes, there's a component to messaging those internally, making sure the employees get it, what the company values, what they offer. But then how have you changed how you tell that story externally, like
Yeah.
channels or like what's working for you?
Yeah, it is a lot of work. So we're embarking on that journey now. So a lot of what we did was we started by creating, we actually went through a new corporate branding. So we got the new purple, we used to be blue. And with that, a new website. And now we're building a new talent brand as well with our creative team. So we're using a lot of that content and collateral to kind of refresh our employer branding. But it is a lot of work. So again, we anchored on a strategy. We're thinking about all of the channels that we need to update, all the collateral that we need to update, new videos, new quotes, new highlighting of new employees, right? Because all of a sudden it used to be all about, in some locations, how much fun we're having in the office, now to our employees going surfing before work, right? So there is a huge overhaul that we underwent in order to do that. And so for us, we started with what was our ICP? How can we find individuals within the organization that like really embody that ICP and then highlight some of the EVP in our messaging? And then once we've done that, we're also thinking about optimizing our multi-touch, multi-person outreach cadence with more personalized and targeted messaging that highlights the EVP, but also kind of changing our talent pools, right? So that's more in line with our ICP, so that the content's resonating with those individuals.
Cool. I love that. Excellent. Yeah. And I think a lot of companies that I talk to, leaders in HR that I talk to, they're really focused on bringing that customer service experience almost to recruiting. So that's a hot topic area of that candidate experience overall. How do you develop a process that feels more like you're on an airline flight or booking a hair salon appointment, right? Those reminders, follow-ups, updates. So it's scalable yet personalized, I think is what a lot of folks are going for today, for sure.
Yeah, and it's for me, or for us at Talkdesk, it comes down to hiring a world-class talent and talent operations organization, a standardized process, and best-in-class tools, so that you can automate some of the redundant tasks that we all face, that frees up our human selves to interact and have that more personalized connection with our candidates.
Totally.
It was easier when we were in office, right? Because you can greet them at the door, have a t-shirt or swag waiting for them, making sure that they have lunch. But we had to be able to scale that in a remote way. And so thinking about how to create more personalized touches in this remote world.
Excellent. Love that. I'm curious too, the kind of the reverse of what we've been talking about. You've shifted the EVP, you're offering something fundamentally new to those candidates that meet your ideal candidate profile, but that also involves, maybe shifting away from folks that wanted something different, right? So I'm curious if you've seen any kind of change to your acceptance rates, or like, have you had to say no to different people, or what does that look like in the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me, we've always, even pre-pandemic, we've always created what we call a bi-directional process. And so essentially what that means is we want to give the candidate as much of an opportunity to learn from us what it's like to work at the organization as we are learning from them. So that way we can ensure a good bi-directional fit. And when you do that, what happens is some of our candidates are actually self-selecting out, right? We're educating them on what it's like, and they're saying that's just not for me, right? That's not a great fit. If you can do that early in the process, it actually creates velocity in the funnel, because now all of a sudden your recruiters, who are a finite resource, quote unquote, can focus on the individuals that are more likely to make it to the offer stage, and that we can qualify out and candidates can self-select out if it's just not a fit. And so we ended the fiscal year with the offer acceptance rate right around 79%, which to me was good, given kind of all of the movement that we've seen in the market and comparing ourselves to other companies within our cohort. And I think we've been able to do that because of some of those factors that I mentioned.
Awesome. That's excellent. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more with that. I think, if you try to be all things to all people, then you wind up with something that's less than ideal. So I think, defining that EVP vision, staying true to it, and then weaving that through the process really feels like a key takeaway for me here. Definitely. Yep. I'm curious too, there's another, theme that's coming up a lot around transparency. And so a lot of companies, you may have seen this online, others in the audience may have as well, where historically you would get the benefits, all of that information is like the very last step of a candidate's process. You sign the offer and literally you get the benefits like the next day. And so a lot of companies are moving that forward to really tout those. I'm curious where you are on that journey at Talkdesk.
Yeah, so we'll send we have a PDF, so we'll send it anywhere in the process if they're asking for it. And often, where we truly shine with our EVP really is that we're offering this flexibility, and we do have great benefits to support employees to work wherever. And so we like to highlight that. There are also places like Glassdoor where you can amplify your benefits, and people are actually reviewing you on your benefits. So we want to make sure that those are top of mind. One of the things that we're also thinking about doing is we're going to unveil in April a new career site, microsite, and thinking about including widgets on those ratings, so those benefit ratings within our career site, so that information is really easy to consume for individuals that are really still top of the funnel and in that exploratory phase.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that gets to that point you made earlier about people self-selecting in or out based on that, and giving them that transparency to understand, is this the right fit for me? Is this the contract that I want to make as an employee and the place I want to be where I'm going to thrive? So I love that. That's excellent. At Talent Visionaries, we always like to get a little bit tactical for the group. So I'd love to know, we've talked about how you've revamped your EVP, tied it to your ideal candidate profile, woven it through the process, all while growing at a very significant rate. So I think you may be underplaying the amount of work that went into that. It sounds like a ton of work, but very well done. I'm curious, for others on the call or others who may watch this later, what advice do you have for someone who's like just getting started thinking about this at their company? What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yes, it was a lot of work, required a coordinated effort across, talent, HR, multiple departments. So the thing that I would suggest is, I guess, two things. So first, take both a qualitative and a quantitative approach. And also, and this might seem counterintuitive, but you want to analyze both your strengths as well as your weaknesses, right? And take a very honest approach to doing both. So I'll tell you how we approached it at Talkdesk, and then you'll probably understand the why. So for us, it started with creating EVP surveys, and then we analyzed the responses of those surveys based on persona and location. So we basically grouped our employee population based on our ICP personas and location. We also assessed attraction drivers of new employees, so why new employees decided to join Talkdesk versus other companies. We engaged in listening tours of our high performers and asked them very similar questions. We also analyzed our engagement survey data, and something that was really important and interesting actually is to analyze the data pre-pandemic and post-pandemic to see if there were any changes. Some of the changes actually surprised us. And then I think just as importantly, we looked at drivers of attrition or pre-turnover reasons of attrition within Talkdesk. We also were able to pull data, similar data within our industry. So we could look at trends and how we compared to industry. And so we took kind of like all of that information and we aligned to Gartner's human deal framework to help us kind of conceptualize and optimize our new EVP. So
Love
that was
that.
our approach. Yeah.
Sounds like a very data-driven approach, but yet, integrating a lot of qualitative factors as well,
Yes,
which is awesome.
exactly. Yep.
Just to add to that a little bit, I'd love to hear high level, what did the rollout look like? So you've done this research, you've looked at it qualitatively, quantitatively, you get a good sense of what people want and don't want today. But what do you do with that next?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first is educating our employees and our executives on the new EVP, ensuring, as we talked about before, that we have updated branding and that resonates with our target audience, making sure that that information flows across systems and across tools. So not only within the candidate experience, but also the employee experience side of the house, so that we have a very consistent experience across the employee journey or candidate journey. It also entails, and we haven't gotten here yet, but ensuring that the message is resonating with our target audience, right? And you can get that feedback in a number of different ways. Our recruiters are using it in their pitch. And so our recruiters know right away whether or not something is landing, and they can give us that information to help us refine our approach. We can also look at changes in offer acceptance rates. Another metric that we track that's really important is we call it new hire churn, but essentially, or short-term churn. Anyone who churns within the first 3 months, we classify it as a mishire essentially. And it just means that we didn't do what I talked about earlier, establish a really solid bi-directional fit. But also sometimes what that means is that that person's what they wanted from the organization is not what we were able to deliver. So maybe we conceptualized a really nice EVP, but it wasn't how they felt we were operating as a company in practice. I also think tracking in your engagement survey results, some of the items that more closely correlate with your EVP would be really important. So those are the things that are coming down the pipe and we're excited about doing.
Excellent. And I really like how you've kind of talked about that short-term churn signal and using that to iterate your process as well, because the more you can react, or the faster you can react to that and iterate, the better human experience you're going to deliver overall, which I think is good for Talkdesk, it's good for you, and it's certainly good for the candidates as well. So that's phenomenal to hear that. That's excellent.
Yeah, that data is sometimes the most rich data that we get, right? Because people are very honest on their way out. If on paper they matched our ICP, we want to know, what exactly was leading to their decision to leave. And we can take that as actionable feedback to make some changes within the organization.
Definitely. Yeah. Bill Gates has a famous saying that your unhappiest customers are your greatest source of learning. And I think that applies in many cases, and certainly in HR, we can take that to heart as well in some cases. Excellent. Well, excellent. Well, this brings us just about to time. So I think we have a few minutes for questions if folks want to chime in. This has been awesome. I learned a lot. So thank you so much, Shauna. This is great. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. And for everyone else, if you like this session and you want more sessions like this, we encourage you to go to gem.com/talent visionaries. And I think Marissa has kindly shared that in the link in the chat box below, but go check it out. We've got a lot of great sessions like this. If you have ideas for future sessions, we'd love to hear it. And have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thanks, everyone.